In this presentation, we will talk about the key issues regarding numbers that you should present in your final presentation. That is, the key financial issues. In essence, we will be talking about the J-curve and how does that reflect your cash flow needs over time. And cash flow will determine what kind of money and when will you ask for that money to investors. So it is all about the relationship between cash flow and requiring money from investors. Think about this framework. We have perceived risk in the horizontal axis and we have value of the venture in the vertical axis. So at the very beginning, you are at the right end, right side end. You have the highest perceived risk and the lowest value of the venture. At the beginning, at the right lower right end of the graph, all you have is an understanding of the customer need and an idea. As you move forward, you begin prototyping, you validate your business model with research from your users and your allies and your suppliers and so on. At some point, you find financing, you get actual customers, you validate new aspects of the business model, you move to a financing round. So the key logic that is behind this whole thing is as you as the value of your venture is perceived outside the firm as higher and the risk is perceived as lower, you will be able to get better terms for the money that you will get. Please let me repeat. All you're trying to do is show the world that you have enough of a project at each time so that you can go out there to find enough money to get to the next milestone. We will see this in more detail later, but this is key. You're not looking for all the money that you will need to make the venture fly. You're looking for the enough money to make the venture go to the next step. And we will discuss why that is so important in the next slides. These are the key issues for the day. First, we're going through a very basic analysis of a cash flow case, of the cash flow of a very basic operation of a company. The whole idea there is for us to see how important cash flow is for the survival of the company, of any company. Now, the second point is how do you use that information to design your strategy for asking money from investors? And how can you use that also to think about how much of a share of your company will you ask from investors at each financing round? So first, cash flow analysis. As you may know, there are three large blocks in any cash flow analysis. You have to distinguish between operational activities, financing activities, and investment activities in the firm. All of these will affect the amount of money that you have in cash at any given time. Now, the most important thing here, where we're going to put our focus in, is you have to be careful to manage cash flow when you're growing. Essentially, what we are used to think that having a company that grows is in general a good thing, and it is. But growth is something that has to be managed with great care. If you grow too fast, or if you're not prepared for the consequences of growth, you can be out of business, as we will see in the next example. Let's see a very simple example. These are the conditions that we will have to take into account to do the example. The firm makes a product and sells it for $1,000. Parts that are acquired from suppliers cost $500. Manufacturing takes 2 months and uses $300 in labor and other costs. The firm receives 2 months credit from suppliers and then 2 months credit. It gives 2 months credit to retail chains to sell the product. And the firm sells 1 unit per month. These are the elements that we need to build our cash flow in this very simple example. Now, this is the outflow. This is taken from the Bear Carey book. You should go to the book and check for the details, but the essence is here. So let's see how does this fit with the conditions that we explained before. First, the firm receives materials in month 1 from suppliers and has to pay these materials on month 3, as we see in the picture. Okay. Now, you get money from your clients, from your customers, 2 months after having delivered the goods. So uh, if you deliver the goods in month 3, then you will only get money from your clients on month 5. Okay. This leads to these are the costs that you have to pay. We said the firm uses $300 in labor and other costs. We're assuming here that these costs paid are divided over the 2 months equally. 150 per month, that would be $300 every 2 months. And that leads us to the basic working capital that is required for producing 1 unit. So that is what is being depicted in that line that we see um, here. Working capital for 1 unit. Remember those figures. Now, as the firm moves forward over time, has to get involved into this cash flow pattern month after month after month, right? It has to do that many times, 12 times here in the example, and that leads to this pattern of monthly cash flow and cumulative cash flow. Monthly cash flow is the sum of the cash flow produced by or demanded by every unit that is being done by the firm, and cumulative cash flow is the sum month after month of the cash flow of the month plus the cash flow that I've generated or that I have used in the months before. So the lowest line, the cumulative cash flow line, is simply adding up the latest result for monthly cash flow to the accumulated cash flow before. You see the pattern here. In terms of cumulative cash flow, what's happening here is that the firm has to go deeper and deeper, is using more and more cash flow every month until month 7 in this example, when that curve changes its shape, right? At that point, the cumulative cash flow is not increasing every month, but is decreasing, right? So at the end of this period, at the end of the 12 months, the firm is in the negative in terms of cumulative cash flow in $450. The lowest point in the cumulative cash flow for this firm in this example is $1,650 in month 6. In month 6, and the from then on, the cumulative cash flow curve starts growing up again. We'll see the consequences of this in a moment. Now let's go to the second example. Pay attention to this. It's exactly the same example, but for one thing. It's exactly the same example in terms of the money that you charge for your product, in terms of the cost of parts and labor, in terms of the amount of time that the firm has to give to the clients, has to wait for payment, and also in terms of the amount of time that that suppliers give the firm. So it has 2 months credit to pay for supplies and has to give 2 months credit for clients, exactly like in the first example. But there's one new condition in the last line here. The firm starts selling 1 unit in the first month and then increases monthly sales in 1 unit. As you remember, in the previous example, the firm sold 1 unit every month. Here we're saying the firm increases sales in 1 unit every month. And we will see that this has substantial consequences for cash flow in the firm. Here we see the schedule of payments and revenues of the firm according to the rules of the new example. So check this. The working capital for 1 unit in every month is exactly the same as before because it's the same conditions, the same price that we charge for our good and the same cost of raw materials and the same time that we have to give suppliers and that we have to give our clients. Now, the difference is that we have one more unit every month. One more unit every month. So as we go along in time, we're producing more and more, and it's reflected in the graph here. Now, this has consequences for cash flow. Go to the last line, right? The monthly cash flow is increasing month after month until month 6, as before. Then it starts decreasing, right? But the cumulative cash flow uh, keeps growing and growing and growing, right? Because even though we're selling more units, right, and we have more money there, well, the cumulative expenses that we're incurring as we pay for our raw materials and as we pay for our labor and so on, is also increasing, right? And the time between the moment that we have to pay our suppliers and the moment when our clients pay to us is pretty large, right? As we see in the example, we start paying our suppliers in month 1, but we only get money from our clients on month 5. So as we grow, we have these 5 months um, breach here where we need to work with our own savings or our own operating capital. And that has consequences in terms of cumulative cash flow. As you see in the last line of this graph, cumulative cash flow keeps increasing, right? In this case, we have a very different situation from the previous example. In this case, cumulative cash flow is negative and increasing until the end of month 12 and probably later in the game. So this is very important. Why? Because as you can imagine, negative cumulative cash flow means that you have to have a stash of money somewhere, right? It has to be either your savings or the money that your investor has given you or something, right? But you need to spend money all the time, right? I mean, you need to have that money ready, right? In your hands so that you're able to pay for the operating expenses of the firm, even though you're selling more and more in this example, right? And that should mean that your business is growing, and that should mean that you're happy, right? But you're not happy, really. There's a reason here not to be that happy, and it is that you need a stash of money at month 1, and you have to be ready to keep spending that money in this example until month 12 and probably later in the game because of the conditions of the terms in which you're paying and getting paid, and because of the fact that you're growing. So if you grow and you're not ready to assume the consequences of this growth in terms of cash flow, you may be in large problems, because even if the company is producing more and more money every month because you're selling more and more, you are also incurring in more expenses. And if you do not have the money to pay for those expenses, your operation will have to close, even if you have a growing business. I hope this is clear at this point, and I hope you take the lesson for your own projects. Be very careful with cash flow. Take a lot of care about the relationships between the price at which you sell, the amount of time that you have to wait until your client pays you, and the kind of time that will go between the moment that you get in which you get your supplies and the moment when you have to pay to the supplier. This is very important, and please work it out with care in your projects. So the key takeaway from the example is here. Growth can be fatal for low margin businesses if cheap capital is not available. So pay attention to this. Even in this very simple example, and any of the projects that you're working on is far more complex than this. You will have to keep your eyes on the full game, right? Which is all the variables that we have mentioned. It's a relationship between the price that you get for your goods, right? The prices that you have to pay for raw materials and labor and every other cost that you're incurring in the times that are involved in the moment when you have to pay your suppliers and the moment when your clients pay you and the moment when you have to deliver the goods. And also, right, what does that imply in terms of the margin of the business, especially the gross margin, and um, and the cost of capital that you're facing when you're looking for money out there, right? And in general terms, capital is very expensive for small firms, right? These smaller firms, new projects face very, very stringent conditions. Sometimes they just can't get, for example, credits from banks and so on. So it can be very hard. What we're saying is make sure that you're working in a business that allows you to have an important margin, right? That's why we have made so much emphasis, in pricing and in really, really hitting into delivering value for your customer. If you're delivering high value for your customer, you can think of getting a fair price, a good price for what you're selling, and that will lead you to a substantial margin, and that will allow you to live even if capital out there is expensive. If you're working with very thin margins, then just the financial conditions can take you out of the business, even if you have a good idea. This is very, very important for you to take into account. Go through those numbers. As you see, the calculations are very basic. It's just arithmetic. But be sure that you include there all the relevant costs. Don't fool yourselves thinking that you're running a very low-cost operation. Go back there and really be sure of every cost that you have to take into account. Because in the moment when you have to pay for those goods, then you will feel the pressure. The higher, the lower the margin, the tougher it will be for you to survive in the business, given the conditions that you're facing for capital out there. So what does it all have to do with the search for investment? Let's talk about first about the J curve. The J curve is a graph that presents the last line in the example that we saw. The J curve is a graph of the cumulative cash flow of your project. Remember this, the J curve is a graph of the cumulative cash flow of your project. Now, the shape of this J curve is closely related to the decisions that you will have to make in terms of looking for capital out there. Let's see. Take a look at this graph. What we have here is a J-curve, first seen from the entrepreneur standpoint and also from the investor standpoint. What does that mean? First, we need to be very clear about this. The amount of money that you will have to ask at a given time is the cumulative cash flow. That is very clear. The cumulative cash flow shows the amount of money that you need to have ready at hand in order to keep the business going. Okay? So that in the graph is the area between the horizontal line and the J curve, right? And the sum of that is the total investment required. So your investors, the people that you will ask for money, will be very interested in the shape of this curve and in the area below the horizontal line. The graph here, which comes also from the Berkeley book, shows that in general, right, the entrepreneur's view is much more optimistic and rosy than the investor's view. When you go out to get money and you present your investors with a J curve, what they will immediately think is this guy is being optimistic because he's an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs look at the world with rosy eyes. So they will immediately start figuring out in their minds that you may not be able to sell at the price that you think you will be selling, and that some of your clients will take longer to pay you, and so on. And that means that in the eyes of the investor, your J curve will be moving to the right and will be going deeper. Okay, so this is just a warning that you need to have in your minds when you discuss terms and so on with your investor. Please take into account that when you show your J curve and you show your schedule for cumulative cash flow, they will be thinking in less optimistic terms. First lesson here. Some other things that you need to take into account. One, the shape of the J curve is not stable over time, as we see here. At the very beginning, you may have to spend a lot of money. I mean, you need to have to do a lot of expenses in a very short time, as we see here. And then when you start selling, then the shape of the J curve goes flatter, of course, because you start on you're not only spending money, but you're also making some money here. and sales will flatten your curve bit, but it is also true that at some point the fact that you're selling will demand that you go lower and lower in terms of cumulative cash flow, right? I mean, it's one thing to sell, to start selling, but then if you need to, and you're expected to achieve a sales ramp up, I mean, if you're expected to achieve acceleration of sales at some point, then you need to take into account that your cash flow needs will be higher and the cumulative cash flow curve will go lower. Okay, these should come out naturally from your figures. I mean, the key thing is to really be careful in writing up in that Excel spreadsheet every single cost, right? And never underestimate the cost that you will be facing. When you start growing in sales, right? When you do your projections and you say we will be growing in sales in 200% from year 2 to year 3, please take into account that that will also cost you money, right? Because you will may have to have more salespeople, and also you may have to have some more administrative costs in order to have for these salespeople to be effective. So the fact that you're selling more is good because you're getting more income, but you're also spending more money, and usually you spend the money before you get the income. So be aware of this. Different businesses have, of course, different J curves, and Berkeley is trying to get us to think about this with this graph. We have three different businesses here. One option is to purchase an existing retail business. The other is a software business from the outset, develop a software business from the beginning, and also develop a biotech business. And as you can see, these are very different. When you purchase an existing business, right, you have to lay out a large expenditure at the outset, at the beginning, but then you start getting money almost the next month, right? So Berkeley shows us here that this can be a very favorable shape in terms of the J curve, because the lowest point of the curve is incurred in month one, and from then on, the cumulative cash flow is getting lower and lower, and that can be very favorable if you have the money to get into the game. Now, the second example is the software business. This would be more of a classic J curve where you start spending money at the outset and developing your product and so on. It takes you a while to get to a lowest point of the J curve, and then you move up. This example is similar to the one that we just saw. And finally, there are some businesses where you have to be willing and ready to spend a lot of money for a long time. Like, for example, biotech, right? Where you have to keep putting money into the business because there are many issues, items related to research and then tests and then going through the regulatory channels and so on. And you never see money there. I mean, you are spending money, but you're not producing money. Now, in that kind of business, the payoff may come late in the game, but in one single big amount of money, because these companies, once they have a product that has survived that has done well in tests with animals and with humans, for example, then you may get the interest of a large company, and that company may buy the company completely, right? So you will never have to face issues about dealing with clients and so on. What you're doing is investing for a long term, for a period of time that can be very large, and then at one single point in time, you get all the money, right? That would be the example. Now, why this is important? Because when you face an investor, a professional investor, that person will have in their minds a schedule for your J curve, right? Just because you're working in a specific business, the investor will have in their mind one J curve for you, right? They will be thinking of you in terms of that prototypical J curve that they have in their minds. And it's very important for you to understand how does that curve in the shape, what is the shape of that curve in the mind of your investor, right? Because that you should be building your arguments, right, in order to let that person see that the problems that are associated with that specific J curve are really smaller than he thinks, and that the benefits will be larger. But it's very hard to do that if you don't know what is the idea that the investor has in terms of the J curve that you are presenting to him. So let's connect this all together. The relationship between the J curve and the money that you will be asking from your investors. So in this example that Berkeley presents to us, uh, he says that the total investment required is $12 million, right? You know that from your projections, and let's assume that in this case the projections are really, really good, and that's exactly the money that you will need, $12 million. So what are your options here? You could go to the investor and ask for the $12 million in month one, right? And you may say, well, if I know that I need $12 million, then let's just go there and ask for that money, right? For the full thing. So from then on, I will be able to concentrate on developing my product and developing my business, and I will not be distracted by this issue of having to find money from investors. That's one way of seeing it, but that is the wrong way. Why? Because if you get all the money at the outset, right? If you get your $12 million at the outset, then you have to be ready to give the investor a very, very large percentage of your firm, right? If you go out there at the beginning, that is the moment when the risk is higher. Remember the graph that we saw at the beginning of the presentation. If you ask for it, month number one, the beginning of the project, is exactly the moment when risk on your business is perceived as the highest, right? So if you go for all the money at that moment, then the investor will have every right to ask you for a very large percentage of equity of your company, because there is a balance between risk and reward, right? So you're asking his money at the moment of the highest risk, then he will want the highest reward, right? So you do not want to do that, because if you did that, then you would have to basically forego uh, the largest percentage of equity in your company. What you want to do is to ask for enough money to get to a significant milestone, right? Ask for enough money to get to a significant milestone. Then, what is a significant milestone? Well, it's something that happens in your business where you can argue, right, that the risk in your business is lower, right? Some specific important goal that you have achieved, and allows the people in the rest of the world to see that your business is really going on, is happening in reality, and the risk gets lower and lower. We'll see how this works. But what matters the key thing to have in mind here is that you have to think about getting that the investment in chunks or rounds, as they say here, as Berkeley puts it here, and as people talk about this in the business, right? Round one, round two, round three, and then a final round. So these rounds are designed, right, to get money in order to allow you to go to the next significant milestone. And you have to get money until the moment when the J curve gets to a lowest point. Okay? Because when the J curve gets to a lowest point and then starts going up, that means that your business is producing more and more cash, more and more positive cash, or less and less negative cash, and from that moment on, you should be able to survive on your own. Okay, so in this example, the entrepreneurs asked first for 1 million, then for 2 million, then for 5 million, and then for 4 million, right? So in the end, it's $12 million, but we will see now why is it so important to go in small chunks. And in particular, it is very important at the outset to ask only for the lowest amount of money that will allow you to go to the next milestone, right? Even if people are willing to give you more money, you should not do that, because if you take their money at that time, then you will have to forego a higher percentage of equity than you want to. Let's see. What is happening here then? This table is connected to the previous graph that we saw. Uh, Check the third line in the table, the line that says milestones met. So this is the first thing that you have to think about. what are the milestones that will allow me to tell the world that my project is moving forward? It's happening in reality. The risk associated to the project is going lower and lower because the actual achievements of the business are out there for everyone to see. So in this example, in round one at the outset of the project, then you have nothing to show for it, right? You have your plan, your idea, and not a lot more. Round two, in this example, is done when the entrepreneur has a product that is finished, has a product that is real, that you can show people, that you can test with potential customers. And um, in this example, you may expect that you have a product that customers are saying that they want. It's been tested only. You're not selling yet, but the product is there. You can show it to people. If the technical issues are solved, you're not talking anymore about a dream, but about something that is concrete. Surely you will have to keep improving on it, but it is very clear that you have something in your hands now. Now let's think about round three. You already started selling, but you need money to ramp up in customers. Okay, so you have achieved evidence that there is a fit between your product and the market need. People are willing. People not only like your product, but are willing to pay, and that is very good. So at this point, you need to prove that your business can grow. Right. In order to grow, you have to go into this ramp up in customers. Right. You have to engage in a big effort to increase sales, to expand probably geographically. That requires money, and that's why that's the moment to go for another round. And finally, the final round is there to allow you to go for a goal of accelerated growth. So as you can see there, the milestones are the key, the backbone of the whole table and of the whole exercise. You need to be able to define your milestones in a very specific and credible way, and see how this is related to the money, the amount of money that you're asking for from investors, and also to the valuation of the company. Of course, as you move forward with the product, right, and you achieve your milestones, then the valuation of the company should go up, right? If at the beginning with your idea the evaluation is just $3 million, when you have a product that is finished and that you can show to people, the valuation is $8 million in this example. When you show that you can grow in customers, the valuation is 30 million. And when you go for the accelerated growth phase, that when you have shown all the other results, then the valuation of the firm is 60 million, right? So what the entrepreneurs are doing here is, let's get the only the amount of money that we need in order to get to the next round, right? And as we see, that amount of money keeps growing, right? At the beginning, they ask only for $1 million, then for 2 million, then for 5 million, well, then for 4 million in the final round, right? And at each stage, when they get the money, you can see that the amount of equity that they have to give in order to get the money is lower. I mean, of course, at each round, their own participation in equity keeps going down, right? At the beginning is after first round is 66%, then 49.5, then 41, then 38. Okay, but pay attention to this: the marginal equity that they have to give away per dollar invested goes lower and lower. That means they get more money, but at each round they have to give away less and less equity. You see, at the beginning they had to give away. They keep 66% of the equity of the firm. That means that they have 34% of the equity that they gave away to investors, and they gave away that equity in exchange for $1 million. Right now, from then on, they get $11 million more in equity, but the equity that they can keep is 38%. So at the beginning they gave away 34% of equity in exchange for $1 million. Then they get $11 million more, right? But they only have to give away the difference between 38 and 66. Let's see this more clearly in this in this table. What I've done here is go um, give more detail to a table that is in the Berkeley book. And let's go through it. So this table is an extended version of the table that appears in Exhibit 3.9, page 63 of the Berkeley book. I've chosen to do the extended version because I think it's more clear. It's easier to see what's going on, and I'm also sending you, making available for you an Excel spreadsheet where you can go in detail, looking for what happens at each round of investment, and how does the amount of money that is provided by the investors affect the valuation of the company, and also affect the share of equity, the split in equity shares between the original creators of the business, the entrepreneurs, and the investors as they move forward. But uh, right now, I just want to highlight a couple of issues, and then you will go through the Excel spreadsheet in detail, and you will be able to see what's going on behind these numbers. The key thing to see here is this. The original investors gave $1 million in round one, and they got in exchange 33% of the business. Okay, 33.333 percent of the business. Now, investors in round four gave us $4 million, right? But they only got 6.7% of equity in the business. You see what's going on here? At the beginning, equity is really expensive for the entrepreneur. So you need the money from the investor, but you have to be very careful in giving, putting on the table the lowest percentage of the firm that you can, because this is at the round one is the moment when money will be more expensive for you. Okay. As you move forward, and if you remember from the last slide, round four is related to the final milestone. That is when they're looking for money for the accelerated growth stage. So the different risks associated to the business up to that point have been covered, right? You have been able to show, you as an entrepreneur has been able to show that you can make a product, that you can sell the product, that you can do an initial sales ramp up, and now you want the money in order to grow. Okay, so in the final round, you're able to ask for money, giving away a much lower percentage of equity than at the beginning. That is the essence of the argument, and that's what you should work out in your own projects. Think about what are the key milestones that you will be achieving, right? What are the key milestones that will prove investors that you really have a project in your hands? Okay. And how can you design a schedule for going out for money, right? That is in the most favorable terms for you as an entrepreneur. Okay. Because even if people want to give you money in the first round, as I said before, then that money will be of a very high cost for you. Imagine if you got the $12 million. I mean, if investors were able to get 33% for $1 million, right? Imagine then how much would they want in order to give you the $12 million at round number one. Okay, that you would have to give away control of virtually the full company. Okay, so if you go in steps, and those steps are closely linked to the milestones, then you will be able to get the money that you need, giving away less and less of your company. As in this example, where the final $4 million that investors gave, you were only giving them 6.7% of equity at the final stage of the company. What are the mechanics of this? Exactly how will you do this table for your own business? Well, I think that should be completely clear if you go through the Excel spreadsheet that is provided for you. So it's not worth the while to go into those complex analysis here, because when you see the numbers, it will be obvious for you in the Excel spreadsheet. So this presentation is finished here. I hope the key takeaways are with you at this point. So to wrap up, some key takeaways. First, we've said it before, growth can be very bad for you if you're not ready. Okay, so think about that. Do your calculations. Do your best to get a high margin for your product. That is essential. If your margin is low compared to your cost of capital, then you will be in trouble. In order to create a substantial margin, then you have to create value for your customer, right? That is what will allow you to go for a higher price. That is where your research is so important. All the research that you have done until now is key because that is what allows you to understand how to create value for your customer. And that is what will allow you to command a good price. Um, think about the cash flow consequences of all this. What can you do in order to reduce the time that you have to wait in order for your client to pay you, for your customer to pay you? And how can you increase the time that you will need, that you will have to in your hands, that you will have in your hands to pay your suppliers? Think about Dell Computer. That was the genius of Michael Dell. He was able to convince suppliers that they will have to carry the inventory. So he would only order parts when he had a client. And he had a client when the client had already paid. Each individual came into Dell's website and pay for the computer with their credit card. So the time there was reduced to zero. And then Dell introduced this way of dealing with suppliers, where he was able to have them deliver the goods only after he had the client. So essentially, the key advantage for his business was this mechanism that he devised for operating cash flow. That's why it was so hard to copy. Okay, key takeaways. How do you define the milestones? Think very hard about that. What matters is what are the events that will allow you to change the perception of risk on your project. Okay, milestones are not only operating goals that you have. Milestones are essentially moments when you prove the world that you do have a business and that your business has achieved a major success in the path that you have set. Okay, so think about that. Go to investors, ask them, what would be the key milestones in a project like this? Try to understand your project from the standpoint of the investor, which is the only thing that matters at this point when you're asking for money. And finally, be very careful and realistic about calculating the amount of money that you will need to go from one milestone to the next. Okay, because that's what investors will be thinking about. You should be able to explain that amount of money very precisely to the investors. If they don't believe you, then they will not give you the money. If they think that your thinking is flawed, they will not give you the money. So you have to do a lot of research, and you have to be very careful with your calculations, and you have to do your homework, because if investors uh, at this point in the discussion think that you are not being realistic or careful or knowledgeable about the way you go in calculating your own costs, the costs involved in getting to the next stage, then you will be in trouble. This is where you build up the faith of the investor in you. In these discussions about milestones, this is where they decide if you are worthy of their time and money, or you are not. So setting up these milestones and calculating the amount of money involved in getting from one milestone to the next is really very important. Please be very careful with that when you create your projects. Well, this is the end of the presentation. I will make available the materials for you in Sikua Plus. That means the spreadsheet where you will be able to see what's behind the final table that I presented here. And also, well, you already have the readings. There are some additional materials on how to do valuation that are, I believe, self-explanatory and very easy to read. It's a document of 5 pages that I will also make available for you on the web. Thank you.